Yep.
Okay, so the way I've set this up, and we'll kind of, Laura and I will have to kind of ad lib and weaving this together. So this is all unrehearsed. But I'm going to start off by saying right off the bat, I do not know even how to sew a button. So I have zero skills, and I kind of fell into this in a funny way. So this is going to be a little bit of a history of our collaboration, and then well, I'd like to go through it. But Laura, you can interrupt me at any time you want in the presentation, especially when it gets into your work. So to be clear, is I'm a graphic designer, sculptor, painter, a digital media artist. I teach at Southern New Hampshire University, and I have had no background in fashion design whatsoever, or in the technical aspects of sewing. So let me go back to 2014 when a colleague of mine invited me to collaborate with her in making a dress that had to do with science and technology. This was a competition that we entered together as collaborators at the MIT Media Lab, sponsored by a uh, organization called Science, which is a bunch of um, scientists that have a keen interest in fashion, and their idea in the whole concept of this show is to illustrate different ways of uh, through the works that's submitted to this competition to show the link between fashion, technology, and science. So we became finalists. It was a pretty rigorous process that took place over, um, I would say, 8 months, and not knowing how to sew, there was a sewist I found locally that worked from my Photoshop illustrations to come up with this particular look, which is entitled the Luminous Firefly Dress. And this dress had LED lights woven into it that reacted to sound. And this was my first kind of entry into wearable art and apparel, I guess you would call it. Although this is not ready to wear. The what was I going to say? Yeah, this required programming um, and also a type of processor called an Arduino. And on to the next thing here. PowerPoint is not cooperating. There's a detail. All right, so this particular work, the Firefly dress, gained attention, and it gave me the opportunity to work again collaboratively with somebody on another project that had to do with an invitation to show work in Brazil during the Olympics at the it was called the Olympiad Mode Couture fashion show, and I had a partner that I was gonna work with, a designer, and at the last minute, she backed out of the project, so I had to find a new partner. I mean, my main interest through all of this was into dye sublimation printing and the conversion of a lot of my skills in Illustrator and Photoshop into making textile prints that could be converted into apparel. And that's when serendipitously I ran into Laura at a not a Photoshop, a photo workshop, and someone introduced us. A friend of Laura's introduced us, and um, I thought, just maybe this person would want to go with me to Brazil and work on this project, and she said yes. So this was this look here, and Laura, please feel free to jump in. This was kind of a test uh, as to whether we could work together and do something. And this is, I'll let Laura describe what we're looking at.
Well, Harry came to me and said that he had developed some prints that were sort of inspired by African traditional textiles, and that he wanted them to be turned into garments. And I don't remember where the jumpsuit idea came in. Anyway, it was supposed to be a lycra spandex jumpsuit. So I was like, okay, African traditional prints, lycra jumpsuit, Rio, sure, I'll do that. So this is what I put together, and the jacket was then sort of like an add-on to make it an outfit. And ironically, the jacket is kind of what stole the show because as soon as Haley, who's the model, put this on, everyone was crowding around saying, "Where'd you get that jacket? I love that jacket." So yeah, but the initial push was to put the textiles onto the body in a pleasing form. So
Yeah, the textile print is inspired by Andrinka patterns from West Africa. So that's what um, I started with, and a lot of it had to do with my original partner was African, and I thought my interest in it would fit well with her interest, but she did not want to go to Brazil. So in Brazil, this was kind of a mini collection that was put together. And all these are Laura's designs, and we brought all these to Brazil in one or two suitcases.
well,
And
this was this was the next the jumping off point from that African inspired print. These are other things that Harry had working was working on, and they were printed on fabrics and just sort of made into these garments. There was no real cohesion other than that. Um, but yeah, it was highly experimental and very fun.
we started originally printing with spoon flour, and then it was clear that we needed to find other resources for printing, and I actually contemplated buying a dye sublimation printer and so on and so on. But we found a company called EFI, which now owns the Reggiani printers, and we began using those printers at the factory, which is located in New Hampshire, to print everything, a lot of things subsequently to this. We also used a company in New York, First to Print, and I think some members of our group here are familiar with First to Print, which I think goes under another name now. So this is a detail of one of the patterns I created. I'm pretty expert with Photoshop and Illustrator, so this kind of work comes really easily to me. And I got to be honest, when this all started, I was just cranking out patterns and giving them to Laura, and it would be like, Laura, can you make something out of this? And it was kind of a loose collaboration at first, and maybe not even really a true collaboration in terms of the fashion end. And then Jay allowed us into Boston Fashion Week in 2017. I don't know if Jay remembers this, but we showed some derivations from the Rio show at the W Hotel, and that was quite a story. A lot of stories with that show. We had to build the special that platform they're on. We had to build ourselves, and at the end of the evening, it was a grand show. At the end of the evening, the hotel lost my car keys, and they gave me a free room with a lot of vodka, and that was fun. But onward we go, and this is going to 2000. I think this is still, yeah, this is 2018,
No,
and
2017.
2000, all right, this is also 2017, and I'm going to let Laura take it from here.
Well, okay, this is a photo from a big runway show that we put together, worked on for most of the year of 2017, and then it was presented in October at the Courier Museum in Manchester. And it was a big collection of printed fabrics that were turned into garments and silhouettes that were designed. All of it was sort of conceived around the idea of telling a story. Um, and the story we chose was one that related to the organization that this event was to benefit, called Hope for New Hampshire Recovery. It's an organization that provides support to addicts in recovery, and this was a fundraiser for them. So the story sort of was loosely um, about following someone who is in a dark space, a dark, isolated, alienated state, in the throes of addiction, however you want to interpret that, and their journey out of that through the turmoil that ensues and through the rebirth and the new life that waits at the end of the tunnel. So the whole show was based on that journey, and the prints that Harry developed that we worked on together were carefully sort of curated to promote those ideas, and that's what you're looking at there.
So the patterns for this particular, I mean, the textile prints for this show all stem from my photography of nature, and New Hampshire, the country, the countryside of New Hampshire, the woods near where I lived were a perfect resource for that and developing these different prints based on photos of plants, pine cones. There are a few seashells that were kind of brought in there, but mainly photography of plants.
Harry, at this point, for Harry and Laura, I'm going to jump in and open up the presentation to questions. I know now, having worked with the two of you for a little bit, this is an extensive body of work and a wonderful exchange between an amazing textile designer and an amazing apparel designer. And it's been a joy to start to get to know this body of work that you have both produced together. And for me, the primary question I would have for you is, for both of you, which are your favorite materials to work with that you've gotten a chance to work with? Because in some cases with digital printing, it might limit the opportunity to use certain materials. So I do see a lot of stretch fabrics. So I just wanted to ask that question to Laura first, and then Harry second.
So the question was, which are my favorite materials to work with?
What you have explored with Harry in your collaboration, what have been some of the favorite materials that you've been able to work with that are the printed materials that were provided by Harry as your partner textile designer?
Well, a lot of the stuff, the stuff that went to Rio and the stuff that was part of the Boston Fashion Week show, was all knit, printed knits, which um, I don't know. I'm not a fan of working with knits. I prefer things with more structure. But as far as the visual and tactile qualities of the fabrics that we worked with, I really like the printed sheers, because layering sheer on sheer or sheer over different colors, I like the effects that you can create, and the feeling of a garment like that. I think the print sort of comes alive in a way that it doesn't with a knit, um, or with a more opaque, solid fabric. So that's what I'd say in answer to that.
That's great,
Um,
Laura. Thank you. And Harry, how about for you? Which do you feel is the material that represents your design intent to the
Um,
fullest?
yeah, again, I defer to Laura on like, the fabrics, but I, I, I might not know how to sew a button, but I did quite a bit of due diligence with research. Laura took me to the Mood warehouse in New York, and we schlepped around together and alone to investigate different materials and looks. I did a lot of looking in windows in New York City and went into certain boutiques. And one material that I found really fascinating was neoprene. And then, of course, places like Spoonflower and First to Print, printing on neoprene really requires heavy duty industrial printers. I found online people that printed on neoprene, but they were doing like scuba outfits and, for, scuba divers. And there are very few people that were doing anything with printing on neoprene. And to this day, I don't think there's a whole lot of that out there. And simply because the technology to do it is not very accessible. There's one company I found in California that did it, but they're not really, they were just into, um, kind of heavy metal graphics and not really anything that, they weren't people that I could work with. But yeah, the neoprene was really fascinating. And then, now Laura and I are thinking of creating another collection together going forward called Armatura, which may involve things like bamboo and uh, other materials that could be formed into exoskeleton. It's kind of an exoskeleton concept, um, and I hope that gives you some information.
I
Yeah,
just
it
sent
does.
you
Thank you.
the graphic, Harry.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to mention a name of a material which is similar to neoprene, but it's thinner and it's an apparel material rather than a active wear sport material, which was called shark skin.
Mm,
So put that on your list as it's a bit
Yeah,
thinner and
yeah.
it's a
this
neoprene type, but it is able to be printed a little bit easier.
Mhm.
something we showed in New York was this printed holographic material, and uh, Laura seemed to take a shine to it. She might dispute that now, but she seemed to take a shine to it and put together these looks for a show in New York at Belange Productions. And
Until
uh,
Anita left them on the sidewalk.
yeah, these were actually these looks were stolen by somebody. We don't know who. So, but yeah, this material I've also brought into some of my Lumitexture designs that I just love. For me, it's just a treat to go back and forth between apparel and sculpture and even architectural lighting. It all seems to fit and work out for me.
On that point, Harry, I'm going to open it up to some questions. Does anybody have questions for Laura or Harry?
I had a question, this is Wanda, for Harry about the sculptural pieces. Sort of, does this echo things you've done before, or is this a new direction for you?
Well, in 2014, an engineer I was working with introduced me to programmed lighting, and so that started all this interest in light sculpture. And the outcome was a show that I did, an installation show at the university where I teach, called Gestural Surfaces. And all of these prints that you see, these are photographic prints that are printed on an acrylic or they're actually printed on a kind of gel that 3M makes and then laminated to a acrylic substrate. All of these came out of my photography and the print work that I did in collaboration with Laura. You know, that, as I was saying, the work going from apparel to sculpture and to lighting installations was kind of seamless, and it's led to all kinds of other things in terms of ideas for architecture. And I've talked to Adrian a little bit about my interest in using fabric in a sculptural way for lighting design. So stay
And
tuned.
yeah, you're my perfect example of surface design, you and Jay, bringing these beautiful patterns from all these wonderful references onto a variety of different materials and surfaces. And some of them are lit up, some of them are, you know, changing color and have this wonderful programmatic effect. And it's great to see this work. And thank you so much to
Oh, thank.
both
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah, thanks for having this show. It's been a really great experience.